Release the Kraken!
Good evening, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lanebuck Studios, and today we're going to look at how to do in-game timers for your whatever game you're making. So, I've always had to do timers by hand, which is kind of a pain in the butt, and Unreal is no different. You still have to do them by hand. They don't have any internal pre-built timer, but the timer we're going to look at today is how to do. So here's Rocket Flip. Been working on this, and you see I have the timer down here. And of course it works. It does what it's supposed to do. You know, it starts, it stops. And I can pause it. You know, whenever the menu's up, it stops, whatever. We're going to look at how to actually put the timer together and get the countdown going. So, unlike my usual tutorials where I break everything down step by step, I'm going to go off of the assumption that you kind of know how to get around Unreal and you know how to make widgets and that sort of thing. I'm not going to set up all the bare bones kind of deals, but just for this particular timer, I do have an image to display my timer on, and I have a widget that the timer will be set to. So you can say I have a timer where I have the background image, and then I have a text to set it to. Okay, and then to get the text, that's just over here on your standard window. So to the left here we have text. You just drag that in, whatever text block you want, give it a name and whatever. So I'll just leave this one here, right there. I'll call this timer for the tutorial. Go ahead and center that up. And for the sake of my particular window here, if you want to make sure this is going to stay wherever you want it, you can move your anchor. If you hold down the control key and then click in the center of the anchor and then drag it, you'll snap your target to it, and then you can move this wherever you want, and then it'll always be anchored to that location on the screen. And then for this, I'm just going to center up my text on the anchor. So go to alignment 0.5, 0.5. I'll just drag this one right above that one. Okay, so I have my timer for this, and then of course for the actual font type, I just changed the font out. So for this one, I'm actually using the digital font. If you go to defonts.com or whatever, you can get the digital. I forget who it's done by, but I'll leave a link in the description if I can recall where I got it. Alright, so I have my timer for this, and it really comes down to where you want to put the information for your timer. I'm actually storing my timer on the game mode because some game modes have the timer and some game modes don't, but that's up to you. So I'm going to go over to my game mode here. And I'm just going to go ahead and find a spot. We're going to need our tick. So I'm going to come over here. You can see my timer, of course, is already set up, but we're going to make one ourselves. So what we're going to need are some variables. You can see I already have them here. I'm going to make some new ones just so we can do it together. We're going to store these as integers. And I'm storing this as milliseconds, seconds, and minutes, and I spelled milliseconds wrong, so I'll go ahead and fix that real quick. It's good to name things correctly. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hit new variable. I'll call this timer tut in milliseconds. Change that to an integer type. Let's get the next one. This is going to be timer tut in seconds. And timer tut in minutes. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my current timer here. This is just to help me start and stop the timer. You can add this if you ever wanted to. And we'll go ahead and find our own empty spot here. Go ahead and drag our timer in milliseconds in. Grab that. Borrow my tick over here. Now the one thing you won't find pretty much anywhere is how to get your milliseconds. So you can actually go inside and do get milliseconds, and you can see there are some functions for for date and time span, and you can pull these in. But these need a timer struct data structure. So if you don't have one or you don't know where to get one, that can be kind of confusing. So to not have to deal with this, I'm going to show you a simple way of doing it yourself. So just drag off of your delta seconds here. And we're going to do a multiply, so float times float. And all you have to do is multiply your world seconds by 100. There are 1,000 milliseconds per second, so this should give us a very close approximate to that, because our delta seconds is about 0.033-ish seconds per tick or whatever it is. It should round out. Anyway, we're going to take that, I'm going to truncate it because we want to pass this into our timer, which is an integer, and it can't accept a float, so we're going to do a truncate. That'll give us an integer return value, and then of course that will go to our time in milliseconds. And we're just going to set this every tick. So I have this running off of this sequence here. That's fine. Let's go ahead and plug that in. Great. And then, like I said, there's 1,000 milliseconds per second. So we want to make sure that whenever this reaches the allotted amount of seconds, or milliseconds in this case, we want this to return to 0. So we're going to go ahead and do a branch. And it's going to check. And you can do it off of this one, it's fine. I'm going to do greater than. And it's going to be integer greater than integer. Plug that in. And in my case, since I only want to see 2 digits, I'm just going to make sure that this is at 99. If we're going to do 3 digits, then it'd be 999, whatever. So whenever it's at 99 milliseconds, we are going to have it do some stuff. And I have a bunch of stuff in the way, so let's just move this out of the way. Once we get that, we're going to set our milliseconds back down to 0. So that's going to reset. And now we can start doing our seconds. Seconds are going to work kind of the same way. I'm going to drag that in. But we don't have to do any fancy math. All we have to do is add 1 to our current second count. So I'll go ahead and drag that off. I'll do an increment. I'll do an increment integer. Plug this in. And then from there, we're going to do our seconds. So I'll go ahead and branch it, or our minutes. Sorry. So branch it. There are, of course, 60 seconds per minute. So I'm going to go ahead and drag off of here. I'm going to do a greater than. Grab our integer, plug it in. So greater than 59. It's going to roll to 0. So grab our tutorial seconds, drag it in. This will be back to 0. And then we're going to increment our minutes. So here's our timer in minutes. And then increment. Plug it in. And so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that here. You should have a basic concept by this point. And if we go ahead and run this, we should see everything. We just want to make sure that we pass all this back into our widget. So whatever widget you're using, I'm going to grab that text block here, go over to bind. I'm going to do a create binding. Now I stored this on my game mode. Remember, I'm storing this in my game mode here. So I'm going to cast to my game mode. So do a cast to game mode. Mine is the rocket ship or ship game mode, whatever yours is if you're using the default. You can actually do this as a pure cast. So right click on it, you can do it as a pure cast because this will always be a game mode. Kind of drag that in, we'll do game mode and do a get. It'll just look for the current one being used. I'm going to drag off and get my variables out of there. I need my seconds. Go ahead and get my tutorial seconds. So tutorial milliseconds. And then tut. We'll get the seconds, and then tut. I'll grab the minutes. Oops, wrong one. Okay. And then to put this out, we're going to do an append. Sorry, go ahead and just right click, do append. Sometimes it's picky. Plug that in. It'll convert it for us, which is nice. We need a couple spots here, so we need one for minutes, and then a space for a colon, and then another one for our seconds, a space for a colon, and then another one for our milliseconds. So Go ahead in B, I'll put a colon, and then inside D, I will do a colon. Move this off. And then to get these going, I'm going to go ahead and do a to text. And then I'm going to look for an integer type. To text integer. What's nice about these is we can set the parameter here, so hit the drop down, and we can say the minimum amount of digits, we can do that as 2. That we always have, 2 for the seconds and minutes and milliseconds. Alright, this one's going to go in the position for minutes. Let's move this off a little bit. So minutes go into here. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. So Control W on that. This one's going to go into C. That's going to be our seconds. Seconds. And then duplicate that. And then milliseconds to there. Plug it in. Compile it. Play it. And once you're in there, oh, silly me. Go ahead and close that real quick. I forgot to do a very important thing, which is, where are you at? Go back to my game mode here. We forgot to do a piece of math here, which is to add this back to itself. So grab that. I'm just going to do a int plus int. So integer plus integer. Plug that in. And then the integer we're going to be adding it to is itself, so let's go ahead and duplicate this thing. Plug that in. That way it gets the value and it adds it back to itself. There we go. So this is going, and it should count out to about 1 second. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, so on. And it should be pretty accurate. Close enough for whatever your purposes are in game. And then if you wanted to have this start whenever you pause it or whatever, that's pretty simple. You can just put a little branch on here. Like I made a variable for starting the timer. I do a branch. Put my start timer on there. And then this is tied to anything that requires a start or stop. So for example, inside, let me go to the mission prompt here. So whenever the mission prompt pops up, if I hit the start button, I get a cast to, I do all the stuff that you would do for like checking your mouse or whatever, but then I cast to the game mode, and then I get that timer, and I just make sure it's turned on. And if I want to pause the timer, go back to my widget here, graph here. If I were to hit the menu button, this will pause. You can see here I do a cast to the game mode. And all I do is I turn the timer off. So if I were to play, you see the timer's not running. If I hit start, timer goes. And if I hit the button, timer freezes. Close it, timer goes. So if you want to know how to do a timer, hopefully that's pretty quick. And hopefully you can use it in your game. If you're interested in playing Rocket Flip, it will be up pretty soon for testing. I got like 50 people, so if you want to test it, shoot me an email with a link to you or whatever. Say, hey, this is my email, and I'll add it to the Google Play Store. That way you can get early access to it. I only got room for 50 slots, so first come, first serve. Anyway, hopefully this was good for you, and I shall see you in the next one. Hey guys, thanks for checking out my channel. Misty and I both thank you. If you've enjoyed the video you just watched, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, make sure you leave them down in the comments. I upload new content every Sunday, and I release content every Wednesday. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon. Get content early. I also have official merch, Lame Duck Studio merch. It does exist. They do exist. So make sure you stick around for anything new, and I will see you next time.